с вами о знании ирландской культуры, потому что только взаимный интерес к истории, к литературе, музыке, другим видам искусства, к науке рождает подлинный диалог между народами. И сейчас я хотела бы предоставить слово директору Ирландского культурного центра у нас в Петербурге, доцентру кафедры ЮНЕСКО образования в поликультурном обществе РГПУ имени Герцена Андрею Вазгеновичу Машиняну. Уважаемый Андрей Вазгенович, вам слово. Пока вы готовитесь к выступлению, прошу прощения, не дала возможность задать, может быть, вопросы. Уважаемые коллеги, есть ли вопросы? Возможно, они появятся позже, и у всех желающих будет такая возможность задать их в третьей секции, да, в которой как раз и будет также вести, продолжить свою работу Людмила Снегирева. Андрей Вазгенович, вам слово. Спасибо большое.
Dear colleagues, it's a big honor for me to present the small talk about the Irish-Russian cultural connections through history. It is, of course, a historical factor that Russian and Irish cultures and Russian and Irish people were interested in each other through the history. And if we look back to our past, we'll see that all that started in the Middle Ages, when the first Irish monks and the first members of the Irish clergy appeared in medieval Kiev Rus. Curiously enough, these first Irish monks and the members of Irish clergy belonged to the so-called German colony, which existed in the beginning of the 11th and 12th centuries in the Kiev Rus state. Those people, those active monks, they helped to conduct missionary activities. They also helped the leaders of the German colony to establish trade routes with the local Russians who lived in the Kiev Rus state. Also, grand masters of the existing military orders of chivalry also used their diplomatic and trade missions in establishing contact. The first period stopped after the Tatar-Mongol capture of the most parts of the ancient Russian state. And then it was the second turn when the so-called Novgorod Republic became the main focus of interest for the Irish clergy and Irish monks, trade missionaries. We do not have any evidences in books or in images that show the same active part of the Irish monks as it was in the Kiev Rus. But if we look at the traditions that existed in Novgorod the Great as the part of the great Hanseatic League, we'll see that a lot of experience of the Irish clergy, which was used during the Kiev period, prolonged and was also used in the Novgorod times. And it was not only in the trade missions or in some diplomatic missions, but also in such very significant parts of the medieval culture as the visual sacred culture. I'm speaking about the famous crosses and famous sacred monuments. If you look at the shapes and form of these monuments, typical for medieval Rus and medieval Ireland, you will see a lot of similarities and interconnections. Here I just want to focus on these two images of the very well-known Alexeyev cross in the Sofia Cathedral of Great Novgorod, and also one of the most outstanding Iona crosses in the medieval Cathedral of Monaster Boys in Middle Ireland. So if you compare the symbolism of these two crosses, you will see a lot of similarities and a lot of stylistic features that resemble each other. Then if we go from the medieval period to the next page of our cross-cultural history of relations between Ireland and Russia. Another very significant moment will be, of course, the 18th century. 18th century, which gave at least several world-known names of Irish-born generals who made brilliant military and civil careers in the time of Russian Empire, from Peter the Great to Catherine the Great. Of course, I'm speaking about Peter de Lacy, Pyotr Petrovich Lacy, who started as the young officer recruited by Peter the Great new formed army in the Great Northern War in the very beginning of the 18th century, and finished as the Field Marshal General and Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Imperial Army in the middle of the 18th century, when he became very well known and well appreciated by several Russian emperors, thanks and due to his brilliant victories over the Swedish in several wars. One of the most curious facts about this man, General Peter de Lacy, Pyotr Petrovich Lacy, which is very much appreciated by our Irish colleagues, especially those Lord Mayors of Dublin and Cork who are visiting St. Petersburg, or during our visits to Dublin and Cork. It is the fact that Peter de Lacy was the only Irish in the history of our relations who conducted the powers of active Governor General of St. Petersburg. It lasted for 3 months when Elizabeth, future Emperor and Tsarina Elizaveta Petrovna, Queen Elizabeth, daughter of Peter the Great, went for coronation, traditional Russian coronation, to Moscow, and left General Peter de Lacy to conduct the powers of Governor General of St. Petersburg. Another very famous name is the successor of General Peter de Lacy in military career and in civil service, George Brown, Irish-born George Brown, another member of the so-called Wild Geese movement. Wild Geese, those representatives of Irish Catholics who were defeated by the Protestant army of William the Orange during the Battle of the Boyne and the Siege of Limerick in the end of the 17th century, and then spread over the territory of Europe from France to Russia. So George Brown, in Russian tradition, Yuri Yuryevich Brown, was married to the elder daughter of General Peter de Lacy. He became the second important figure in the history of the outstanding Irish on the Russian imperial service. He also finished as the Field Marshal of the Russian army, as a very famous general who actively participated in several wars with Turkey during the 18th century, was badly wounded and after that commissioned to a pension, but who continued his civil service as general governor of Livonia. Livonia, it is the Russian imperial province which spread over the territory of modern Baltic states of Estonia and Latvia, and also part of the northern Lithuania. So in this civil service, which lasted for more than 30 years, George Brown also succeeded to Peter de Lacy, who after finish of his military career continued as Governor General of Livonia with his seat in Riga. And the third, maybe most famous representative of those leading Irish generals on the Russian imperial service is, of course, Joseph Cornelius O'Rourke. In Russian tradition, Iosif Kornilievich O'Rourke, whose famous portrait made by George Doe is in the first line of the portraits of the heroes of the Napoleon Wars in the Winter Palace, in the Hermitage. And a lot of our Irish friends, from diplomats and ambassadors to our guests from the Irish universities, our academic friends, normally during their first visits to St. Petersburg want to see this portrait kept in the first line of the heroes of the military gallery of the heroes of the Napoleon War. Here you can see the portrait of Joseph Cornelius O'Rourke. He was very well known by his outstanding role in Russian-Turkish War in Serbia, and then of course in all Napoleon campaigns. We turn from the 18th century heroes to the 19th century most brilliant cultural figures of Irish born and bred cultural figures who became famous in Russia. Of course, I'm speaking about poet and musician Thomas Moore, and of course of the world-known Irish composer and musician John Field. While Thomas Moore, this brilliant representative of Irish romantic tradition in literature, became famous for his play Lalla Rookh, in which the future Russian Emperor Nicholas I, being prince and successor of the throne, played one of the prominent roles in Berlin, and then became known for his evening melodies, those poems, lyrical poems of romantic style, added by the traditional Irish harp music. One of the most interesting facts about Thomas Moore and his appreciation in Russia is that his famous piece called The Evening Bells became so popular in Russia after Kozlov made a translation of it into Russian language that in decades several generations of Russian people were absolutely sure that this song is Russian popular song and belongs to the Russian national tradition, though it was written by the Irish poet Thomas Moore. And of course, speaking about Moore, we cannot avoid speaking about John Field, who was not only known in Russia, but wrote his most interesting and most outstanding musical pieces living in Moscow and then in St. Petersburg. Here is one of the most famous portraits of John Field playing his musical instrument, sitting in the Palace of Nobility in St. Petersburg. Curious enough is that now, if you come out of the metro station Griboyedov Canal in the center of St. Petersburg, first what you see is the stand to the left from you, which was put there during the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg. And that stand says European Walk, Island, John Field, because just opposite to this stand, you can see the building of the famous St. Petersburg Philharmonic Hall. And this Philharmonic Hall became so known and became the center and main focus of the classical music in St. Petersburg, because John Field played his musical pieces there, being guest of the owner of the building, Count Rostopchin. The 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century in the Russian-Irish cross-cultural connections must be marked not only by the famous Irish who appeared in Russia, well, in reality like John Field, or metaphorically and in the thoughts of the public like Thomas Moore, but also by a famous Russian noble person, the first Russian political dissident of that time, Vladimir Pecherin, who lived most of his life in Ireland as the poorest part of the Britain of that time. And he became not only a political dissident, by an outstanding religious figure, a member of the Order of Redemptionists, and he served for many years as supporter of the poorest dwellers of Dublin and the area, and helped them much in trying to get medical service and trying to support them in the most critical moments of their life by kind word, by the religious word. And being an outstanding figure of that kind, Vladimir Pecherin became the first link which today connects Russian nobility who became dissident towards the power of that time to Ireland and to the newly formed Irish identity. In the 20th century, we of course know several examples of very curious and very significant connections in literature. I won't now I don't have time to stop much on that, but I want, of course, to mark the role of Zinaida Gippius and Nikolai Gumilev, because these two outstanding figures of the Russian Silver Age are connected to Ireland as the country and to the Irish literary tradition. It was Zinaida Gippius who, thanks to her friend Zinaida Vengerova, outstanding promoter of the Irish culture and translator of Irish literature, she became interested in Celtic revival and in Ireland in literary and political way, and she wrote in December 1917 her famous poem Why, devoted to Ireland. It is a wonderful example of Russian symbolism poetry, which has Ireland as the symbol, as a metaphor of the country very close to Russia of that time. О, Ирландия океанная, мной невиденная страна, почему ее зыбь туманная в ясность здешнего вплетена? Я не думал о ней, не думаю, я не знаю ее, не знал. Почему ж так режут тоску мою лезвие ее острых скал? Another very important moment in the Irish-Russian cultural connection of the time was Nikolai Gumilev's visit to London and his personal meeting with William Butler Yeats, leader of Celtic revival, which resulted in Gumilev's famous play Gondola, which became in fact the only Russian Silver Age piece of literature connected to the Irish legends and Irish legendary hero. Later today, when we'll work in sections, one of our colleagues and friends, Dr. Philip McDonough, former ambassador of Ireland to the Russian Federation, will speak more about Gondola, because he made translation of this play into English language. First English translation ever made of the piece of the Silver Age literature connected to Ireland. Here you can see the poster of Gondola, made in 1922, unfortunately after death of Gumilev, who was assassinated by the Bolsheviks as the pretended participant of the plot against Soviet power. Later in the 20th century, two bright examples of Irish-Russian literary connections are Ethel Voynich with her famous novel Gadfly, which became so known and so popular in Soviet Russia that was included in the obligatory program for the Russian secondary schools. And also the famous fairy tale films by Alexander Rowe, our Irish-born film director, very known by such pieces as Vasilisa Prekrasnaya, which you can see here in the poster, or Moroska, or some other brightest examples of Russian film, fairy tales film. And to finish my today's short presentation of this panorama of the Russian-Irish cross-cultural connections, I just want to mention, of course, the end of the 20th century, the time of the so-called Second Celtic Revival in Ireland. It is connected to the interest to folk music and the so-called New Age folk culture. And this is the time of the appearance of several musical bands, both in Russia and in Ireland, which are interconnected in the cultural way. Here I would like to mention, of course, the world-known River Dance by Michael Flatley. In the program of this wonderful Irish dance show, there are elements of the Russian traditional dances included into the program. And with these elements of Russian dance inside of their program, River Dance gained the world-known fame in different countries from east to the west. And of course, here in Russia as well, we have several directions of the folk inspired by the Irish and widely by the Celtic folk music and New Age music. And one of the most well-known examples are, of course, such bands as Atavayo and Railroad. Here you can see them on the poster, who used a lot of Irish traditional music in their own Russian-oriented ethnic musical works. Such groups as Sherwood, you can see here in the poster the leader of the group, Yuri Ivanov, who was the first to make Russian translations of famous Irish ballads of the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. And of course, the famous musical band Sawmill or Melnitsa, whose leader Natalia O'Shea became very well known in Europe as both the conductor of the Russian musical tradition and representative of Russian musical tradition, and also as the performer of the Irish songs and Irish melodies as well. And to finish my today's short presentation, I want to show the picture where I am presenting my own pieces of literature together with very famous St. Petersburg born and bred Russian Irish harp musician Anastasia Sergeyeva, who also is a representative of this tradition of using Irish musical elements and this so-called new Irish Celtic revival in music with the traditions of Russian harp music and Russian classical tradition. In this photo, you see our double performance at the Cockwold Book Fest in 2016. That's what I wanted to say during my short presentation. And to finish, I just want to say that, of course, tradition of Russian-Irish cultural links, historical links is very rich, and it is a certain field where we can embrace a lot of new achievements and open new interesting pages. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Уважаемый Андрей Вазгенович, благодарим вас за такой очень емкий рассказ о кросс-культурных различных пересечениях в истории, музыке, литературе. И я очень надеюсь, что поскольку в нашей аудитории, многочисленной аудитории в нашем сегодняшнем форуме, найдутся исследователи, которые вдохновятся этим рассказом, да, и действительно серьезно займутся научными изысканиями в области русских, российско-ирландских культурных отношений. Вы обозначили очень такие интересные точки, которые для многих сегодня из, наверное, присутствующих были каким-то даже открытием. Большое спасибо. Уважаемые коллеги, есть ли вопросы к докладчику? Будет возможность еще задать их чуть позже.
Елена Робертовна, вы позволите буквально одну вещь? Я увидел вопросы, которые здесь задаются, да, и я хотел бы попросить мою коллегу сейчас, Татьяну Николаевну Иванову, заместителя директора Ирландского центра и президента СПЛТ, показать книгу, потому что вопросы многих коллег здесь, они касаются того, где можно почитать и увидеть материалы того, о чем я говорил сейчас. Да? Благодаря посольству Ирландии в Российской Федерации и Enterprise Island в 2017 году было напечатано первое издание, в 2018 второе издание книги под названием «Ирландия больше, чем остров». И вот мне было предложено написать 8 из 12 глав этой книги, и в том числе главу, о которой, ну, собственно, на основе которой я сейчас сделал это короткое сообщение под названием «Русско-ирландские связи». Если можно, Татьяна Николаевна, дайте, пожалуйста, возможность ей показать просто сейчас.
Да,
людям,
я показываю, просто
книга.
видите, нас очень много, поэтому мелко достаточно. Но я написала название книги в чате.
Спасибо большое. Вот, в общем, это первый такой полноценный том, более чем 500-страничный том, посвященный разным сторонам жизни Ирландии для русского читателя. И поэтому там можно найти самую разную информацию и про литературу, и про историю, и про русско-ирландские культурные связи, и про сегодняшний день, и про музыку. В общем, это первый такой вот... Мои коллеги, кроме меня, соавторами этой книги являются 4 моих ирландских коллег, в основном или живущих в России, или постоянно здесь бывающих. И я был очень рад оказаться в такой замечательной компании.
Спасибо большое.